Una, dos, tres.
Here tonight, all the way from Guadalajara, Mexico, making his VMA debut.
On October 14th, the Estadio Caliente in Tijuana was scheduled to host a concert for the insanely popular and record-breaking Mexican singer Peso Pluma. But in the run-up to the event, a drug cartel held up banners across the city, informing Peso that if he performed at this concert, it would be his last. With legions of adoring fans and a growing list of powerful enemies, Peso is arguably one of the most influential musicians currently in this side of the world. Peso Pluma grew up in the city of Zapopan in northern Mexico but went to high school in San Antonio, Texas. It was through navigating these two different worlds that paved the way for his music today, and ironically enough, he didn't start making music in English. He was listening to hip-hop and reggaeton, yet at the same time had a major appreciation for traditional Mexican music song style known as the corrido. According to Latino Alternative TV, the corrido is a Mexican musical genre that tells the tales of bandits, heroes, traitors, and icons. And these have been popular for generations in rural Mexico. In recent years, a new genre of music known as the corridos tumbados has emerged, which has been embraced by Peso Pluma. This takes the traditional corrido and infuses it with modern music like trap, hip-hop, and reggaeton, and also tells modern stories. So there are some songs from this music where the story revolves around Mexico's current drug lords and cartel members. And as I'll get into later, these topics are seen as a bit too close to the bone. The style and image of this music has also been given a makeover where younger Mexicans are dressing more like their favorite rapper and abandoning traditional Mexican attire. As Isabelia Herrera writes in Pitchfork, artists have traded cowboy boots for Patek Philippe watches and limited edition Nikes, updating the genre's aesthetics for the present moment. Speaking to Variety magazine, Peso said, "I've always listened to reggaeton, hip-hop, and rap, but I realized that my voice was made to sing corridos because I would hear them played around family all the time. My family listens to that genre, and well, the more I sang, the more I realized my voice shined differently there than in any other genre." Peso worked on an album with the help of his cousin, Roberto Tito Elijah, who's also a singer. The name Peso Pluma translates to the boxing category of featherweight, and he got his name after a chance encounter with the Mexican boxer Marco Antonio Barrera, who was a champion in this category. Peso's first album was released in just 2020, and it didn't chart, but his growth as a musician gradually began to rise. His second album gained further momentum, and its single Por las Noches entered the Billboard 100. This is a breakup song, and Peso Pluma is not only talking about gangs and bandits in the song, but also about relationships and romance. In 2022, his song El Belicón sold 480,000 copies in the US and became certified 8 times platinum record when you adjust it for the Latin charts. Through releasing all of his songs in Spanish, Peso has tapped into the massive market that's Spanish-speaking or bilingual speakers within the US. However, we're also seeing a shift where Americans without any Latino background are happy to listen to music in Spanish, with the likes of Bad Bunny and Karol G just some of the names breaking through. Artists from previous eras like Shakira, Ricky Martin, and Enrique Iglesias needed to have some songs in English to cross over into the mainstream, but this is now becoming less and less of an issue, and Peso Pluma is one of the biggest examples of this new phenomenon. As John Pareles from the New York Times wrote, English language pop's timid, long-time gatekeepers, radio stations, have been outflanked by audio and video streaming services. As with K-pop and reggaeton, language barriers have been challenged by corridos tumbados. Peso's music is categorized as regional Mexican, which is a genre predominantly listened to by Mexicans and Latinos in southern USA. Peso said in a recent interview, "They call it regional Mexican music, but how's that possible? People are listening to corridos even in Japan." On the surface, this seems like a wonderful story. A young Mexican guy has become a success in the US, and he did this by paying homage to his native culture. But when it comes to the content of his music and what he's actually talking about, things get a little more complicated. His music about cartels has sparked a debate that hip-hop fans will be overly familiar with, where critics say he's glorifying violence, but fans argue that he's reflecting his reality. In an interview, Peso said, "The corridos have always been very attacked and very demonized. At the end of the day, it is music. You see it in rap, you see it in hip-hop, you see it in reggaeton. I take it as transmitting the vibes that I feel when I'm in the studio, in a booth. When I'm composing, it's simply doing what I like to do and sharing my passion. When speaking to the LA Times in May, he seemed less willing to defend his music and even shut down the interview when asked about his alleged glorification of the cartels. Speaking about this experience, a journalist wrote, "Before I finish the question, Pluma utters nah and tosses his smartphone across the table. His publicist then told the Times that he does not talk about politics." Peso even admitted that drug gangs sometimes pay Mexican musicians to write a corrido about them or one of their friends. In an interview in October of 2022, Peso said, "There are people who call us and are like, hey, how much do you charge for a corrido? It's not that we're supporting or being apologists, it's just work." The president of Mexico has even come out and criticized Peso Pluma. Speaking about his song AMG, which is about the Mercedes-Benz, he said, "As if material things were the most important things. Brand clothes, houses, jewelry, power, or arrogance. There are other options, there are other alternatives. It's possible to be happy in another way." There's two sides to this argument. On the one hand, Peso is simply telling stories in the medium of songs, and these are being misinterpreted as support. However, you can see where his critics are coming from in the music video for El Belicón, where Peso stars as a member of the cartel and is surrounded by beautiful women in fancy cars. But the song that got El Peso in the most trouble is Siempre Pendientes, which is about a young soldier working for El Chapo, the famous and now imprisoned leader of the Sinaloa cartel. In this song, Peso is speaking from the viewpoint of the foot soldier, so is complimentary about his leader. In the songs, the soldier sings, "I take care of Señor Guzman's plaza," and whether these are Peso's views or not, his thoughts about El Chapo are not at odds with a lot of young people in Mexico. A blogger was asked why El Chapo is popular in Mexico, and his response was, "Because he's a living legend. He's like Al Capone, he's like Lucky Luciano, like Tony Soprano, like Scarface. He's like a character on a television show, except that he's alive. He's real." That being said, the Mexicans who don't like El Chapo are probably not going to be expressing these opinions in the media. And at a concert on September 10th, Peso was less ambiguous about his thoughts on El Chapo. During this concert, Peso got the crowd to chant JLG at the concert, which stood for Joaquin Guzman Loera, the full initials of El Chapo. This turned out to be an incredibly dangerous move to make, and one, ironically, politics. 2 days after the concert, banners appeared in Tijuana that sent a dangerous message out to Peso Pluma. The banners read, "This is for you, Peso Pluma. Abstain from performing on October 14th because it will be your last performance because you're disrespectful and you're loose tongue. Show up and we will F you up." The letters were signed by the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. This is a cartel that split from the Sinaloa cartel in 2010 and has been involved in territorial battles with them ever since. They've been described by the US Department of Justice as one of the 5 most dangerous transnational criminal organizations in the world. Clearly, Peso had made some powerful and deadly enemies. In response, several of Peso Pluma's concerts were postponed due to, quote, unforeseen circumstances, but the promoters didn't make any direct reference as to why it was canceled. On the ticket pages, it read, "The event organizer has had to postpone your event." A message on the ticket pages for the affected dates reads, "Please hold on to your tickets as they will be valid for the new date." The concerns of these concert promoters were not overblown. In 1992, Chalino Sanchez, who was known as the king of the corridos, received a death note in the middle of a performance, and hours afterwards, he was killed. More recently, in 2016, the singer Valentin Elizalde was ambushed after a concert and killed after performing on enemy turf. And although these singers were killed in Mexico, the promoters seem to think that Peso is still at risk while performing in the US. His concerts have been canceled in Milwaukee, Chicago, Indianapolis, and Birmingham, Alabama. Ticketmaster and Live Nation said that the concerts would take place later in the fall, presumably to give them more time to assess the situation and provide extra safety measures, or maybe negotiate and make some peace behind the scenes. But despite these concerns, Peso went on to perform his song Lady Gaga at the VMAs. This was on September 14th, merely 2 days after he received these threats. In the aftermath, Peso received little or no sympathy from Mexican state leaders. The mayor of Tijuana, Montserrat Caballero, has said that they'll obviously investigate these criminal threats, but said, "Let's be clear. They sing and make an apology of crime, and thus they should know the risks and consequences. We know that singers like Peso Pluma advocate for crime. Unfortunately, those who suffer the consequences are the citizens." Thankfully, the person who allegedly placed the banners has been arrested. Police said he was at the time and place. When he saw the authorities, he ran away. He was then arrested and found with narcotics in the bag. It was almost 3 in the morning. Interestingly enough, this person was detained not for threatening Peso Pluma, but, quote, due to the terror that was caused on the community, not for what was written in the message. As for the future of these shows, time will tell when these concerts will eventually take place, if they will at all, but having drawn attention from fans, cartel members, politicians, and even people who weren't even aware of what was going on with Peso Pluma, it's certainly something that's worked in his favor popularity-wise, and we'll soon see what's to come of that. Make sure to subscribe for more.